Jordan Lee sat quietly in the back of an Uber, his mind racing as the car made its way toward the third garage on his list. He wasn't new to the world of auto repair. She had inherited the family business from his father 5 years ago. The business had once been a pillar in the state, with garages scattered across the region. At first, everything seemed to be running smoothly. The garages were bustling, the staff was happy, and customers kept coming back. But recently, Jordan had been hearing complaints. It was the same story across every garage. Long wait times, shoddy repairs, and customers upset with the service. It wasn't just the complaints that troubled him. It was the lack of accountability. Every time Jordan reached out to the district manager, Tom, there was an excuse. We're understaffed. There are supply chain issues. Or customers are too picky. But Jordan knew better. Something wasn't adding up, and he wasn't about to let the reputation his father had built crumble under the weight of poor management. Jordan had built his career on trust in his employees and trust in his company. But lately, that trust had been shaken. He had hired Tom years ago, confident in his ability to manage. Tom had been with the company for a long time, and Jordan had hoped his experience would be enough to keep things running smoothly. Yet the cracks were starting to show, and Jordan knew he couldn't ignore them any longer. That's when he decided to go undercover. No warnings, no heads up. Jordan Lee was going to see what was really going on, without anyone knowing he was the CEO. To do this, he created a new identity, John, a regular guy looking for work in the auto repair industry. He grew out a bit of facial hair, kept his baseball cap low to hide his identity, and wore a worn hoodie and jeans stained with oil. It wasn't just about blending in, it was about finding out the truth. When Jordan arrived at the garage, he took a deep breath as he stepped out of the car. The garage was one of the busiest in the area, or so Tom had told him. Tom had said everything was running like a well-oiled machine, but Jordan wasn't convinced. He had to see it for himself. The garage was busy, but not in a way that inspired confidence. Cars were lined up in every bay. Mechanics rushed from car to car, and customers waited in the lobby with impatience written all over their faces. Jordan approached the office with caution, trying to keep a low profile. Inside, the manager, a man in his 40s named Tom, was hunched over his phone, barely acknowledging Jordan's presence. He looked up only when Jordan introduced himself as John, the new guy. Grab a shirt from that box, Tom said dismissively, waving toward a pile of work shirts. Start shadowing one of the techs. Don't screw anything up. There was no welcome, no introductions, no safety briefing, just orders. Jordan grabbed a wrinkled shirt, changed quickly in the bathroom, and stepped into the main area of the garage. The moment he walked in, the smell of burnt rubber and oil hit him hard, mixing with the overpowering scent of sweat and grease. It wasn't a welcoming place, but it was busy. Too busy, Jordan thought, for it to be running smoothly. The mechanics were working fast, their hands covered in grime, and their faces were tired. But it wasn't just the physical exhaustion that caught Jordan's attention, it was the equipment. Tools were strewn around carelessly, some bent or cracked, others held together with duct tape. This was the equipment Jordan had inherited with the company, and it was a far cry from the standards his father had set. Jordan's heart sank as he realized just how much had deteriorated in the years since he'd taken over. As he walked deeper into the garage, his eyes caught sight of a young woman, Lisa. She was underneath the hood of a sedan, fighting with a rusted bolt. Her knuckles were scraped raw, and she seemed to be struggling with the tools in front of her. Jordan approached her, quietly asking if he could help. "You're the new guy, John, right?" she asked, looking up at him with a weary smile. "I'm Lisa Cortez," she added before handing him a flashlight. "Here, hold this." As Jordan held the light, he couldn't help but notice the state of the tools. The wrenches were bent out of shape, the ratchet was falling apart, and several sockets were cracked. "These tools are dangerous," Jordan said quietly. "Aren't they?" Lisa gave a tired laugh. "Yeah, tell that to management," she said, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. "I've been requesting replacements for months, but they just tell me to make do with what I've got." Jordan watched as Lisa tightened a bolt with a cracked socket. Her hands trembled slightly, and Jordan couldn't help but feel a surge of anger. If that tool slipped, it could slice her hand open. How had it come to this? Before he could ask more, a loud voice rang out from across the garage. "Lisa, move your ass. That car's been here for an hour." It was Tom, the manager, storming toward them. His face was red with frustration. "And you, John?" he barked at Jordan. "Don't just stand there. Clean up that bay." Lisa muttered under her breath as she went back to work. Jordan bent down to pick up the tools scattered around the floor, holding his tongue. It was clear that this garage, like so many others, had lost its way. What he witnessed over the next few hours only confirmed his suspicions. Mechanics were working without gloves, and there was a shortage of supplies. A customer was yelling at a tech for asking for an update on their vehicle. A young tech named Tyler, barely 19, was scolded for taking a water break. This wasn't just bad management. This was broken. And it wasn't because there weren't enough workers it was because the employees were being run into the ground, under-equipped, and unsupported. As the day came to an end, Jordan's back ached from scrubbing oil off the floor, and his hands were covered in grime. He sat in the break room, watching Lisa wolf down a sandwich. "Do you like working here?" he asked, his voice careful. Lisa shrugged. "I like fixing cars," she said, her voice flat. "Hate everything else, but I need the paycheck. I'm saving up for tech school." Jordan nodded, feeling a tight knot form in his chest. He had let this happen. He had trusted the wrong people, and now his company was in ruins. The next day, Jordan was determined to dig even deeper. He wasn't leaving until he knew exactly who was hurting his company and who was keeping it alive. The next morning, Jordan returned to the garage early, before the sun had fully risen. The mist in the air was thick, the streetlights casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. He stood outside for a moment, taking in the sight of the garage, feeling a knot in his stomach. The night before had left him shaken, and he wasn't sure what he would uncover today. But there was no turning back now. He took a slow sip of burnt coffee from a styrofoam cup he'd picked up at the gas station down the street. The bitterness matched his mood. He had no illusions anymore. The problems he had discovered yesterday were just the tip of the iceberg. The garage was a mess physically, emotionally, and structurally. He had to know how deep it went. A few minutes later, the garage door creaked open, and Lisa limped inside, her foot dragging slightly with every step. Her ankle was swollen, and Jordan noticed she was barely able to put weight on it. He couldn't help but feel a rush of sympathy. "You all right?" Jordan asked, tossing his coffee cup into a dented trash can. "Rolled my ankle yesterday," she muttered, dropping her backpack onto a bench. "No time to ice it. Got to keep moving." Jordan frowned but didn't press the matter. He knew the culture of the garage work first, everything else later. No one was allowed to show weakness. It was a mentality that had clearly been ingrained in the employees. Jordan followed Lisa inside, where the fluorescent lights flickered above them. The atmosphere felt even more oppressive today. The garage seemed to hum with tension, the workers moving through their tasks without a word. Everyone was busy, but it was the kind of busy that comes from desperation, not efficiency. Jordan clocked in on the ancient punch machine, just as Tom's booming voice echoed from the office. "John, get your ass over here," he ordered. Jordan made his way to the office, his stomach tightening as he stepped inside. Tom was standing by the desk, arms crossed, and his eyes narrowed suspiciously when he saw Jordan enter. He was dressed in his usual uniform, a navy polo shirt, a gold chain around his neck, and a heavy cologne that made Jordan's nose wrinkle. "Listen up," Tom said in a low voice. "We've got inspections coming next week. If you see anything wrong, you keep your mouth shut. Got it?" Jordan was taken aback by the command. Tom was trying to intimidate him, but Jordan wasn't going to let it slide. He measured his words carefully, keeping his voice steady. "Sure, I understand," he said. Tom jabbed a finger at him, his eyes flashing with annoyance. "You're lucky to even have a job here," he muttered. "Don't mess it up." Jordan nodded once and left the office without saying another word. His jaw clenched so tightly that his teeth ached. Tom's blatant disregard for the company's values was appalling, but Jordan knew he had to keep his cool. He wasn't here to start a confrontation just yet, but things were going to change, and fast. As Jordan walked back into the garage, he saw Lisa already under a lifted truck, a ratchet in hand. Tyler, the young mechanic who had been getting scolded yesterday, was wiping down the bay next to her. He looked even worse today. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face was pale from lack of sleep. Another tech, a burly man named Vince, was leaning against the tool cabinet, scrolling through his phone while a customer waited impatiently at the front counter. Jordan approached Vince, trying to make himself useful. "Hey, Vince," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The customers are waiting. Can you help them?" Vince didn't even look up from his phone. "Ain't my problem," he muttered, barely acknowledging Jordan. "That's the front desk's job." Jordan stood there for a moment, stunned by Vince's indifference. He was about to say something when the receptionist, a nervous woman with heavy eyeliner, appeared at the front counter. But before Jordan could address her, he noticed the frustration mounting in the customers' faces. Jordan stepped up to the counter, feeling a wave of frustration wash over him. "Hey," he said to the man waiting, trying to keep his tone polite. "Someone will be with you in just a second." The man didn't look pleased. "My wife's car was supposed to be ready yesterday. Nobody's answering the phone. I drove 40 minutes to get here. What's going on?" Jordan's stomach twisted. "Let me find out for you," he said, trying to keep his cool. He made his way back into the garage, scanning the workers to find the answers. He spotted Lisa, still under the hood of a truck, and approached her. "Hey, you know anything about a Ford Escape? The customer is waiting for a belt replacement." Lisa wiped her hands on a rag and nodded. "Yeah, that's done. Vince was supposed to call the customer yesterday. Didn't happen." Jordan's heart sank. The customer had driven all that way for nothing, all because of Vince's carelessness. He walked back over to Vince, who was now heading toward the vending machine, completely oblivious to the growing frustration in the garage. That Ford Escape was finished. "Why didn't you call the customer?" Jordan asked, his voice steady but tense. Vince shrugged without looking up. "Wasn't my shift?" he muttered, his eyes still glued to his phone. Jordan stared at him in disbelief. Vince didn't even seem to care. It was clear that Vince had no respect for the customers, the company, or his colleagues. This was just another symptom of the deeper problems plaguing the garage. By noon, the garage was in chaos. Oil spills went unmopped, customers were left waiting without any updates, and Vince had disappeared into the back again. Tyler, barely keeping it together, dropped a brake caliper because his hands were shaking from hunger. He hadn't had time for breakfast or lunch, and no one seemed to care. Lisa, despite her injury, kept pushing through the work, refusing to stop even for a moment. She was the only one who seemed committed, but even she couldn't handle the strain forever. Jordan watched as she leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, her ankles swollen and sore. He knew that if things didn't change soon, this garage like the others was going to collapse under the weight of bad management and neglect. It wasn't just the tools that were broken, it was the entire culture. The workers were being run into the ground, and no one seemed to care enough to stop it. The breaking point came mid-afternoon. A woman in her 60s brought in her old minivan for a simple tire rotation. She waited quietly for over 2 hours before finally approaching Tom at the office. "Excuse me," she asked politely. "Could someone at least take a look at my car?" Tom glanced up from his paperwork, rolled his eyes, and muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Maybe if you didn't drive that piece of junk, you wouldn't need so much work done." The woman's face crumpled in hurt, and she quickly turned to leave. Jordan's blood boiled at the disrespect. He stepped forward, his voice steady but full of authority. "Hey, that's not how we talk to customers." Tom turned slowly, a smug smile forming on his face. "You got a problem, John?" "Yeah," Jordan said, his voice cold as ice. "I do." The garage fell silent. Tools clattered to the floor. Conversations stopped. Jordan stood tall, his anger barely contained. "I'm Jordan Lee," he said, his voice echoing off the walls. "I own this company." The workers, including Lisa and Tyler, gaped in shock. Tom's face went pale before turning red with anger. "You're full of it," Tom spat. Jordan didn't flinch. "I built this company with my father, and what I see here, what's happening to these people, is not what we stand for." Tom opened his mouth to argue, but Jordan cut him off. "You're done. Pack your things. You're fired." Tom's face twisted, but he said nothing. He stomped back into the office, slamming the door behind him. Jordan turned to Vince. "You're out too," he said, his voice firm. "This isn't a place for people who don't respect the customers or the team." Vince stood frozen for a moment, his jaw dropping in disbelief. Without a word, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out. The garage was quiet, the air heavy with shock. Jordan turned to the remaining team, his voice softening. "You all deserve better, and starting today, you're going to get it." The shift had begun. The quiet that followed in the garage was almost deafening. The workers stood there, frozen in disbelief. Tom and Vince were gone, and suddenly, the garage seemed to feel both lighter and heavier at the same time. The old management had been ousted, but the burden of what had been allowed to happen was still very much present. Jordan knew that the hard work was just beginning. As the last echoes of the slammed office door faded, Jordan turned to the remaining team. His gaze met Lisa's, who had been standing off to the side, watching everything unfold. Her face was pale, her ankle still throbbing, but there was something different in her eyes, now a sense of relief, even if it was fleeting. "You're taking the rest of the day off. Paid," Jordan said, his voice calm but firm. "And Tyler, you too. Go grab something to eat. You both deserve a break. Tyler, who had been standing silently by the lifts, looked at Jordan in shock. It wasn't just the offer of a paid break that stunned him, it was the idea that someone, anyone, cared enough to acknowledge their hard work. Really? Tyler asked, his voice cracking slightly. Jordan nodded. I'm serious. Take your time. We'll fix this. But first, you need a rest. As Lisa and Tyler headed to the break room to collect their things, Jordan turned to the rest of the team. The garage was in disarray, and he needed to act fast. He pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant. Call HR, Jordan said as soon as they picked up. We need a full review at every location. Also, get me a new regional manager. I'll need someone I can trust to rebuild these garages from the ground up. He hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the task ahead of him. It wasn't going to be easy, but it had to be done. The first step was putting in the right leadership, starting with Angela Ruiz, a trusted operations manager from a previous turnaround project. She was sharp, experienced, and, most importantly, she knew how to get results. Later that evening, Jordan found himself in a small diner, waiting for Angela to arrive. His mind was still racing with everything he had witnessed over the last few days, but he was determined not to let it overwhelm him. He had to focus on the future, not the past. He had to fix what was broken, but he knew that it wouldn't happen overnight. When Angela walked in, she didn't waste any time with pleasantries. She had a no-nonsense look about her, dressed in a dark blazer and slacks, her expression serious but not unkind. I've heard about the situation, she said as she sat down. Let's get to work. Jordan leaned forward, his elbows on the table. I need you to start immediately. I want you to go in, take charge, and start rebuilding. We need a full evaluation of every department front desk, technicians, the works. We need to know who's committed and who isn't. We're starting fresh. Angela nodded, making notes in her notepad. We'll start with one-on-ones. No group meetings. People lie less when they're alone. Jordan smiled slightly. That was exactly what he needed to hear. He trusted Angela to do what needed to be done. The next morning, Angela arrived at the garage before anyone else. She was met by a much quieter, more focused atmosphere than the chaos of the previous day. The workers were still on edge, but there was a noticeable shift. Jordan had made it clear that things were changing, and they were starting to feel it. Angela wasted no time. She began with one-on-one meetings with the remaining employees. Marcus and Dee, the two workers who had been leaning against the wall the day before, were the first to be called into the office. They walked in with their heads held low, clearly intimidated by Angela's presence. After the meetings, Angela came out of the office and gave Jordan a brief summary. Marcus is lazy and rude. Dee is even worse. They admitted to cutting corners because no one cared. Tyler's solid but green, and Lisa's your backbone. Jordan nodded, processing the information. Lisa had been the one to stand out to him from the beginning. Despite her injury, she had kept going. She was dedicated, reliable, and most importantly, she had the kind of work ethic that he wanted to build the team around. We keep Lisa and Tyler, Angela said. The others, they go. Jordan stood up and walked to the back of the garage where Marcus and Dee were. Without hesitation, he addressed them. I need a word, he said, his voice calm but firm. Marcus stood up slowly, trying to act tough. What's this about? You're both done here, Jordan said. Grab your things and leave. Immediately. Dee snorted, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Figures. New boss. Same old crap. Jordan's voice remained steady. You're leaving because you disrespected the company's standards, not because of anything personal. You made your choices. Neither Marcus nor Dee argued further. They gathered their belongings, their faces sullen, and left without a word. As they walked out into the rain, Jordan turned to the rest of the team. You're not alone anymore, he said, his voice carrying across the garage. We're going to fix this the right way. With the dead weight gone, Jordan and Angela were ready to start rebuilding. The first steps were clear. Improve working conditions, give employees the tools and respect they deserved, and focus on quality over quantity. The culture of the garage had to change, but it was going to take time. Angela stepped forward holding a binder. We need to close for a few days, she said quietly. Deep cleaning, equipment repairs, safety inspections, and restocking essential supplies. Jordan hesitated. Closing meant lost revenue, but keeping the garage open in its current state would be far worse. Do it, he said, determination in his voice. Full overhaul. The decision was made. It was time to turn things around. The workers left for the day, but there was a renewed sense of hope in the air. When they came back, things would be different. Jordan walked to the back of the garage and grabbed a mop. He didn't ask anyone else to do it. This was his company, and he was going to put in the work to make it right. It was the first step in a long journey, but he was ready. The garage may have been broken, but it was still worth fixing. 3 days later, when the team returned, the garage had been transformed. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The floors were cleaned, the tools were replaced, and the atmosphere was different. It was no longer a place where employees were treated like disposable tools. It was a place where trust, respect, and hard work were going to rebuild what had been lost. The transformation was just beginning, but for the first time in a long while, Jordan Lee felt hope for the future of his company. 3 days had passed since the garage had closed for its overhaul, and when the doors finally opened again, it looked completely different. The floors were scrubbed and sealed, the walls freshly painted a bright white, and every tool station was neatly organized with brand new equipment. The familiar scent of oil and grease had been replaced by the cleaner, sharper smell of industrial clean air welcome change after months of neglect. The garage now felt clean. It had the kind of sterile, efficient atmosphere that Jordan had envisioned when he first took over the business. This wasn't just about replacing equipment. It was about creating a space where employees felt valued, respected, and empowered to do their best work. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was cultural. As the team arrived that morning, Jordan stood near the bay doors, watching them file in. Brooke, still limping slightly from her injured ankle, was the first to walk in. Her new uniform was crisp, and though she still looked tired, there was a new light in her eyes. Tyler followed, a subtle confidence in his step that had been absent before. He no longer looked like the kid who was afraid to make a mistake. He was ready to take on whatever came next. They both approached Jordan as he waved them over. "This is your garage as much as mine now," Jordan said, his voice steady but warm. "If you see something wrong, speak up. No more turning a blind eye." Brooke nodded. "Will you be around or just checking in?" Jordan smiled, a hint of pride in his expression. "I'm not disappearing. I'll be here, visiting every location, starting with this one." Tyler looked up at the new lifts gleaming under the ceiling lights. "Feels like a real shop now," he said, his voice full of amazement. "It is," Jordan replied, "and it stays that way." Angela Ruiz, who had been overseeing the final touches, handed each of them a laminated checklist. "Daily inspections," she explained. "We catch problems early, we fix them early. This is how we keep it running smoothly." As the day began, Jordan stayed in the background, quietly observing his team as they handled the flow of customers. Brooke immediately took charge of the floor, assigning tasks based on skill level. Tyler, who had once seemed unsure of himself, was now managing the intake forms with surprising efficiency. He double-checked everything before a car even moved into a bay, ensuring that nothing was overlooked. Jordan watched the whole process unfold from a distance, impressed by how smoothly everything was running. There was no chaos, no confusion, no shouting. It was the kind of organized, efficient work environment he had always envisioned. Everyone was doing their part, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like the garage was working like a well-oiled machine. By late afternoon, the garage had cleared out most of the day's appointments. As Jordan walked through the bays, he caught sight of Angela, speaking to a customer who had a question about a repair. Her calm, professional demeanor made an immediate impression on the customer, and Jordan could see that she had already started making a difference. Later, Jordan stepped outside to take a call from Nolan Price, the new regional manager he had hired. Nolan confirmed he would be visiting every garage over the next month and conducting private interviews with each employee. The goal was to get a better sense of how things were going at every location and ensure the changes Jordan had made were being carried out company-wide. As Jordan ended the call, he spotted an older man walking toward the entrance. His jacket was soaked through from the rain, and he held a set of keys in one hand. Jordan immediately moved to open the door for him. "Come on in," Jordan said, giving the man a friendly smile. The man nodded in appreciation as he entered, visibly grateful to be out of the rain. Brooke, seeing the new customer, quickly approached the counter. "Good morning, sir," she said warmly, her voice sincere. "How can we help today?" The man explained that his truck had been making a strange noise whenever he turned. As he spoke, Brooke took down all the details carefully, her focus entirely on the customer. She never rushed him, never showed a hint of impatience. Jordan stood back, watching her interact with the customer, and for the first time, he felt that sense of pride he had been missing for so long. This was how it should have always been. The day wasn't without its challenges. A stubborn, rusted bolt on a customer's sedan delayed a repair longer than expected. But instead of letting the situation escalate, Brooke calmly explained the delay to the customer, offering a loaner vehicle free of charge. Tyler, still getting used to his new responsibilities, accidentally double-booked a service slot, but instead of panicking, he flagged it immediately, and Brooke adjusted the schedule without missing a beat. By the end of the day, the garage had cleared out most of its appointments, and there was a noticeable sense of calm in the air. Customers were leaving satisfied. Employees were working together efficiently, and the garage itself felt like a place of order and purpose. As the team gathered in the break room, now stocked with fresh supplies, Jordan stood up to address them. "You handle today like pros," he said, looking at each of them in turn. "But this is just the beginning." Brooke leaned against the table, her arms crossed but relaxed. "What's next?" she asked, clearly eager to know what came next for the team. Jordan paused for a moment, taking in the new dynamic around him. "Next, we build a team around you," he said, his voice confident. "We're hiring 2 more techs and a full-time service advisor. Until then, we'll stay lean. We'll focus on quality, not volume." Tyler tapped his fingers nervously against his knee. "And what about the other garages?" he asked. "They're getting the same treatment," Jordan replied. "No exceptions." Angela stepped forward, placing a binder on the table. "This is the new employee manual," she said. "It spells out everything, expectations, rights, and procedures. You'll get a full orientation next week." Brooke flipped open the binder, scanning a page. "Paid sick leave?" she said, her surprise clear. "Real sick leave?" "Real sick leave," Jordan confirmed. "You get hurt or sick, you stay home and heal. No punishment." Tyler looked at him, disbelief evident on his face. "And tool allowances?" he asked. "Every year," Jordan said firmly. "You'll never have to patch broken tools again." The room fell silent for a moment as the team absorbed the new reality. The company they worked for was changing, and they were a part of that change. Brooke closed the binder with a soft thud. "Feels like a real company now," she said quietly. "It is," Jordan replied, his voice steady. "We're not just patching holes anymore. We're rebuilding from the foundation up." As the day drew to a close, Jordan stayed behind with Angela to review the first official feedback forms from customers. Every single one praised the service, the cleanliness, and the professionalism. Several customers even mentioned Brooke by name, highlighting her outstanding work. Angela tapped a pen against one of the forms. "You've got a leader in her," she said, her tone thoughtful. Jordan smiled. "I know." He stepped outside into the cool night air, feeling the weight of the past few days lift off his shoulders. The neon sign above the garage buzzed quietly, casting a soft glow on the pavement. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time in a long time, Jordan felt hopeful. The company was finally on the right track. He had remembered the most important lesson. A company wasn't just about profits or efficiency. It was about people. And now, Jordan was determined to protect that at all costs. Brooke stepped out beside him, rubbing her hands together to ward off the chill in the air. "You're not going to vanish on us, right?" she asked, her voice soft but earnest. Jordan shook his head, his expression resolute. "Not a chance." She smiled slightly, the first real smile he'd seen from her in a long time. "Good," she said, "because we're just getting started." Jordan looked back at the garage, the bright lights spilling out onto the lot. For the first time in years, he felt that everything was finally where it needed to be. "Yeah," he said quietly, "we are."